co-host, which is co-hosted by the Brown Gold Project, funded by funded under the UKRI GCRF program. I'm Dr. Shilpi Srivastav. I'm a research fellow based with the Institute of Development Studies, IDS, in the UK, and I'm joined by my colleagues and fellow panelists from the project and also widely from the Institute and other projects as well. And the focus of today's session is on climate justice in South Asia. Just to briefly set the context, and I'm going to start sharing my screen now. So please do let me know if you can't see it. Give me a second. I'm just trying to change the... Is this all right? Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. So as I just introduced the session, this is part of the pre-COP series, which ICAD is, which ICAD is kindly organizing, and we are grateful for an opportunity to share some of the findings from our ongoing project, which is Brown Gold. Just to briefly set the context about Brown Gold, in the Brown Gold project, we are working in 5 sites across Asia and Africa. These are rapidly urbanizing centers. And as you can see in the map, we have Mekelle in Ethiopia, Wa in Ghana, and in Asia, we are working in Nanded and Alleppey in India and Gularia in Nepal. For the session today, given the focus on South Asia, we are really going to focus on insights from Alleppey and Nepal, and have a wider discussion about cross-cutting climate change issues. But having said that, we are quite mindful and also recognize the fact that some of the issues, sorry, this is appearing on my screen because I'm a co-host. Also recognizing the fact that they have some of the issues that we are going to be raising today have wider resonance across our sites. So the project principally looks at or explores the issue of how shit can move away from being a taboo to a resource which we call brown gold, with a view to ensure that these innovations help address the sanitation crisis, enhance off-grid economies, and the well-being of the excluded communities. In terms of links with climate justice, we are already aware, and as most of you know, that there is a persistent and pervasive inequality regarding water, sanitation, and hygiene access across the South Asian countries. This has led to various forms of social and structural injustices around class, caste, genders, ability, and sexuality, regarding issues of access to water, health, and sanitation provision, but also more critically and very important for issues around sanitation, who does the labor when it comes to these provisioning? And mostly, as we know, we found it's women and poor and vulnerable communities. And in Asian context, the whole crisis and challenges related to manual scavenging. Within WASH discourses, sanitation in particular has remained a hidden sector for a long time until very recently. So at the end of the MDG phase, given the dismal and poor performance of sanitation in the development goals, there's been an impetus to focus on sanitation within the WASH debate, and also increasingly recognize that sanitation is really crucial to the realization of sustainable development outcomes. From the climate change angle, South Asia is regarded as a climate hotspot, and the intensity and frequency of climate hazards that all of us are seeing today are likely to increase and magnify in future. In most cases, climate change has and will become a stress multiplier and exacerbate some of the inequalities that we have mentioned above, and the inequalities and the challenges that colleagues are going to mention in the forthcoming presentations. This is also critical for climate justice, because those bearing the impacts of climate change have really not contributed to the problem of climate change. They are not emitting as much, so the burden is disproportionate. And we often see that this sector or this section of communities overlaps with the vulnerable and marginalized communities that we are also sort of working with within the sanitation sector. In this context, context, how should we leverage justice concerns and what are the key issues and gaps we need to recognize and address? So essentially, what are the blind spots in this sector and how can we link up WASH and climate change debates? So drawing on some of the work that we've been doing around climate justice at IDS, we are drawing on a few key pillars, or as they are called, principles of climate justice. This draws on a wide variety of literature linked to the body of environmental justice. And there are 5 key principles on climate justice, which I think play a significant role in actually analyzing and exploring issues and inequalities within the sanitation sector and the intersections with climate justice, climate change. So procedural as it relates to the processes of decision making, whether they are fair, inclusive, participatory, and who actually has voice when it comes to making decisions on sanitation, the sanitation chain, access, and also policies. Distributional, which is really about how social goods and harms, and in the sanitation sector, as we know, harms are quite predominant and fall disproportionately on poor and vulnerable communities. How are these distributed across social groups, across spaces, and also temporally across time? Recognitional injustice relates to recognizing the social differences and, more importantly, realizing whose voice really counts when it comes to devising solutions. So whose knowledge and voice matters when it comes to issues that we are facing at hand. Intergenerational is to do with what are we bequeathing for the next generation, really an important issue when it comes to sanitation workers, because as we've seen, there are some intergenerational dynamics there as well. And justice for nature. So this is an emerging debate within the climate justice scholarship about not just recognizing the human nature connect, but also recognizing that there is an issue of ecological justice, that nature in itself has rights, and we must be quite mindful when we think about issues and policy processes when it comes to realizing climate justice or sanitation justice. So this is just to set the context of what we are going to discuss today and how we see some of these issues getting linked up in the sites that we are working in. I will now hand over to Roshni, my colleague from IDS, who will provide a brief overview of the ongoing review that we are undertaking on climate change and sanitation and WASH. In particular, looking at the critical role of sanitation and also some of the circular economy issues that we are working on. So to briefly introduce Roshni Sumitra has recently completed her Master's in Development Studies from IDS. She's currently a research officer on the Brown Gold Project. She has previously worked with members of parliament and state governments in India on rural development and public finance management. Her interests lie in addressing emerging climate concerns through better waste management and circular economic practices. Over to you, Roshni.
Thank you so much, Shilpi, for that introduction, and greetings to everyone who has joined from all parts of the world. I'm very happy to be sharing some of the insights from our ongoing review, as well as learn from all of you on this topic of paramount importance. To start off, this review set out to understand some of the main debates and the state of action on sanitation through the climate change lens, and analyze some of the neglected dimensions of it and plug in these as the knowledge gaps and draw the wider implications for policy and academic research. To do so, we deployed the methodology of rapid literature review, wherein we engaged with about 50 plus academic and grade literature. Secondly, climate change was reviewed through various hazards, which include the immediate shocks of floods and cyclones, as well as extreme weather events, which demonstrate slow onset and includes droughts, salinization, sea level rise, etc. Thirdly, the focal point of sanitation chain was mapped for all the papers that we reviewed as access and inclusion, as well as fecal sludge management. The geographical location for the review was limited to that of urban sites at the first round of review. And in the second round of review, we further fine-tuned to that of the Brown Gold Project sites, which includes the country sites from India, Nepal, Ghana, Ethiopia, etc. And thereby some of the thematic main debates emerged. Next slide, please. Some of the preliminary analysis shows that there seems to be a predominance of flood studied as a climate change hazard with the focus on the sanitation axis. Secondly, with regard to heat as a climate hazard, there seems to be a limitation due to its invisible and indirect impact on sanitation. And the focus on the documented literature remains on the axis and gender marginality. For instance, Zheng and his associates in 2021 highlighted the physiological stress of heat on sanitation workers. Another study by Venugopal and his associates in 2016 highlighted and showcased the menstrual hygiene practices and the occupational concerns for women in India and the impact of it due to the increasing heat. Thirdly, when it comes to the extreme weather events, which includes the droughts, there seems to be an equal focus on axis as well as FSM. And with regard to FSM, the public health aspects and the microbiological aspects take a central position to it. For instance, Jones and their associates in 2020 had highlighted and showcased how drought could reduce the pathogen desiccation, yet also induce reduced hand washing practices as well as rainwater use case, etc. Some of the other emerging themes on sanitation and climate change includes that of the infrastructural viability as well as the use of technology for sanitation resilience. And whilst doing so, who does it include and who does it leave behind? For most of the hazards that we reviewed, there seems to be a focus on gender marginality, predominantly the sanitation axis, and what does it imply for the climate justice. Next slide, please. Moving forward with the implications at a crucial stage wherein the urgency of climate change has been alarmed multiple times, it is undisputed that sanitation today requires a renewed climate change lens. So some of the implications which emerged from our preliminary analysis include that the social science research remains skewed towards studying the immediate climate shocks as well as the access to sanitation, although that remains very pertinent given the magnitude of the shocks and its visible impacts on sanitation. There seems to be a limited and lack of understanding on certain climate change impacts on sanitation chain, for instance, FSM, and this exacerbates the sanitation inequalities ranging from gender, ability, class, ethnicity, caste, and henceforth. And this also perpetuates the marginality to further heights. Lastly, to conclude and sum up, that the public service delivery of WASH today is at risk with the erratic climate events that we see, and that urban sanitation requires renewed and heightened attention in the forthcoming climate policy dialogues. With that, now I hand over it to further this discussion and the evidences for safe sanitation.
Thank you. Thanks, Roshni. And that was great. Just to highlight that this is part of an ongoing review. So this is just like a very brief snapshot version of what we found in the review so far, and also the limited attention paid to other kinds of hazards, which are becoming more and more common. So stay tuned for further updates as we are working towards a paper based on this review. I will now hand over to Professor N.C. Narayanan. So moving swiftly on to some of our brown gold sites now and hearing from what is happening or what are the intersections that we're observing between climate change and sanitation in our sites. Just to introduce N.C., Professor N.C. Narayanan is the head of the Ashank Desai Center for Policy Studies at the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, India. His work spans issues of local governance, technology and institutional choices in urban sanitation, drinking water reforms and governance, uncertainty and localizing climate action. Over to you, NC.
Thank you, Shilpi and Roshni, for that introduction. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes. So I'm going to briefly deal with how to plan non-network sanitation for both these concerns that we discussed, the normative concerns of sustainability and inclusion. My slides are changing.
Yes, they are, NC.
Yeah. So I'll start with the climate wash nexus. What are the issues? Then there are two broad approaches to sanitation. What is the problems with the conventional sanitation technology? What could be the alternate technologies and how to integrate this for sustainability and inclusion at the local level. So this is the broad, kind of wastewater climate nexus where untreated wastewater can generate this methane and nitrous oxide, which are both GHG, by open discharges to systems and septic systems. The treated wastewater, the biological processes also can actually generate GHG. Similarly, fecal sludge management, even offsite sludge treatment and sludge treatment at the treatment level, and also landfilling, incineration, composting, all that this can actually produce, GHG. And also there are indirect emissions when you have electricity consumption by STPs, sewage treatment plants, and also for transportation of sludge and chemicals. And there are two broad approaches. One is on-site systems, which is a septic tank, which can actually absorb all the the treatment there. And there could be traditional the centralized sewer systems where all households and others are connected to a centralized sewer system where at the periphery of the town of the cities we can have wastewater treatment plants. These are the two extremes of a continuum of sanitation approaches. And despite huge investments in establishing this conventional centralized wastewater treatment plants, why does water pollution prevail was the question that we asked in the beginning. From the climate angle also, it has high capital energy and maintenance costs, it's capital intensive. And our studies showed that small towns and even marginal settlements within big towns are excluded from that. 70% of our sanitation investments have gone to 3 or 4 big cities in India. Similarly, we have like alternate technologies which are more nature-based, like DWAT systems and SBT, soil bioreactor and things like that, which are actually flexible in construction. They can use skilled manpower, unskilled labor at the local level, low investments, low O&M costs, especially energy costs, minimal external inputs, and effective solutions for ecologically sensitive areas also. And our studies show that this is both inclusive and can be environmentally sustainable, especially from the climate point of view. But here the problem is that to plan a conventional STP, you can work with thumb rules, like 70% of the water supplied is wastewater, and then you can show, and you get big financing, you get kind of expert consultants who can actually come and do that. In small towns and for alternate technologies, you don't have that, and so you need very fine-grained data of the quantum of flow of wastewater, then at the community level as wastewater sheds. Then a town is actually very, very different. It has different socioeconomic kind of habitats. So you will get different sanitation zones when you do this situational analysis. So, but who will do this situational analysis? And we ask the question whether academic institutions and local academic institutions can be trained to kind of do this. So this is the kind of drain mapping that they did, the quantum and flow. And then there are different layers of the physical, the socioeconomic, the sanitation infrastructure which is available, which gives us different kinds of sanitation zones. This kind of planning also leads us to who actually deserves public investments of sanitation. So when we did this, we did actually two winter schools and a summer school, where almost 600 students were involved in these 3 exercises, where we did it in the town of Alleppey, where Brown Gold project is now running. They did civil survey, they did water quality analysis, they did socioeconomic survey. They came out with a plan. Then we found that Then we asked the question, who is actually the most deserving to kind of do this? Then we went to a settlement, a marginal settlement called, Municipal Colony, which was the kind of most polluted, and this were the sanitation workers colony also. So we thought, it will be kind of, and there are 52 households in that, and only 30% had, private toilets. So we brought in a, CSR funding, and we built individual toilets for them and then connected them to a DWAT system, what you're seeing here, which is a nature-based kind of a solution system where there are, baffle reactors, then there's a settlement tank, then the final treatment happens through the plant, a plant layer. And then we see that the earlier canal that you see, we see here as, kind of very clean. And then the earlier community toilet, we turned that into a reading room for the students, which was very handy for them, with a television as a classroom during COVID times. And then there is a group of artists who actually made this much more aesthetic also. So now, after 6 years of work, we are actually calling it a living lab, which is actually a collaborative platform between IIT Bombay, local academic institutions, local NGOs, and we are doing a variety of work. The Can Alleppey, a kind of informal initiative, has now been registered as a startup called Technology and Governance Support Group. And this is my last slide. The concluding observations is that, one, there are universal technologies, universal consultants, and wasteful solutions. The need of the hour is to have contextual scientific inquiry, generating fine-grained data. If students are made to kind of participate in it, education is made real world, engaging in local problems. Crowdsourcing of data will bring in better local analysis, translating science and policy to practice through working with local governance, and capacity building of local action with urban local bodies, academic institutions, and citizen groups. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, NC. That was really interesting and also very comprehensive. And just to highlight the issues of co-production and how the Living Lab approach and the kind of collaborative approaches that NC has just touched upon in his presentation are so central to addressing issues of justice and climate justice as well, and some of the work that we've been doing under the Brown Gold Project. So from Alleppey, we move to Gullaria. So I will invite Prabha and then Sabitri, who would be presenting on the social and microbiological aspects of sanitation and how they intersect with climate change. I will introduce them briefly here. So Prabha Pokharel is a social anthropologist who's been part of several research studies exploring climate change and gender nexus in Nepal. Currently, she's the institutional development expert on the Brown Gold Project. She has served as a founder and chairperson of the NGO Integrated Development Society in Nepal. Sabitri Tripathi is a professor of chemistry at the Nepal Engineering College. She's been involved in the WASH sector and research in this field with different national and international institutions. She was awarded diverse research projects on WASH, including the Delphi project funded by the British Council. Currently, she's involved as a researcher on the Brown Gold project, and she's leading the microbiological or the science part of the stream in Nepal with our colleague James, who will come in much later in this session as well. So over to you, Prabha and Sabitri. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. You are.
Yeah, I'm going to start sharing the screen. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, thank you all. And based on the previous slides, we choose Gullaria in Nepal when we were designing this project, because Gullaria was the first small city that was declared open defecation free, and we wanted to see after the ODF what. So this was a small research, and we have different aspects of it. As Selpi just said, we have social aspect, we have microbiological aspect, we have co-composting aspect, and the arts aspect. But we are now going to only to the social aspect and the microbiological expert. In this research, I was with Tanvi Bhatkal also. So next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so in Nepal, only 5% of fecal sludge is managed safely, and other are not safely managed. Although we are reaching the drinking water and toilet coverage is 95.4%, but we are not reaching anywhere in this. And I am presenting you the case study of Guleria. So in Guleria, it's a small town and it's a trade route too. So it's a very heterogeneous population, have very heterogeneous population comprising Brahman, Adivasi, Janjati, Dalit, Muslims, and others. I think the slide is half. Silvi, can you check? Yeah. The toilets are 95% coverage, but and the cap.
Is it this part?
Yeah. Okay.
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 I'll try moving this slide. Prabha, just tell me if that's complete. Is this fine?
This is complete, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe there are parts of it which have gone missing. Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, yeah. So the capture and containment is very less, but what we should keep in mind is the collection chambers, the septic tank, we tell it as a septic tank, but it's like collection chambers and the pits are rings only, we doesn't have any seal bottom. So that makes a very, very important point there. And there are three kind of system there that are used in the small city. Like the municipality has a more scientific type of FSM emptying system with a truck and the integrated waste and fecal sludge management treatment area center. And but it's only cover 8 to 10% of the municipality of the FSM. There are private managed operator too, which cover around 30% of the population needs, and there are self-managed managed by household, which cover 60% of the population needs, and they all three use use manual system, the private and the self, and they throw it in their vicinity, in the land, in the ground. So next, please. So that's what, when we entered that, we did a social survey. We went to field 2 times. We had 2 workshops and 22 FGDs. The FGDs were mostly targeted to marginal group, like the landless, the Muslim women, like the Dalits, and the urban and rural area also. We have 16 KIS and photo boys and photo elicitation. What we found is for the post-ODF challenges is a very big question was lack of implication of contamination, and we did a research, and Savitri madam will fill in that what come after the from the research. So I won't go in detail with that. So the mobile people, 6.4 are landless. They are mobile, looking for opportunities and jobs. So when they move, they don't have access to toilet because they left their toilet behind and they don't have economic capacity to build it. And there is varying practices among the group, caste group, as we said. The caste group are varying, and like the Tharus and Dalits are more open and more better manage the fecal sludge than other groups, because other groups thinks that's not usable, or they don't use it, or they don't manage it. They give it to the private sectors. And the problem with that is the pits and the infrastructure is broken due to lack of maintenance and lack of road infrastructure development work. And some of the toilet are 5% are defecating openly, but some of the water contamination and some are rendered unusable because there is toilet, but they are not used. And the pits are when monsoon occurs and there is flooding, which is the more climate extreme in that area, pits are openly left to flood, left to open, and that is not less, but around 35% of the pits are opened at that time. Please, next slide. Yeah, the three extremes in the area are flood, and during monsoon it's very high. You can see the toilet, which is very inaccessible to anyway. And then water scarcity also has a prominent role. You can see the in integrated waste treatment plant, they burn the plastic every day. And then increased temperature, which also discourages our sanitation worker from wearing PPE, and spread of mosquitoes is very prominent. As you in the down, you can see the way the drinking water and toilets are adjacent to one another, and there is a very high contamination probability. Next. Next, please. So there were inequalities, as I shared in the post-ODF, but it was further exacerbated by the flood, like the landless community, poor household, and without citizens. They don't want to invest in infrastructure, and whatever they invest, the flooding sweeps it away and break it. So that's one thing that's more exaggerated. And like in flood, they don't have way to live, and they don't have toilet. One of the KIA informant told us that they use veranda as a toilet for 1 week continuously, the whole family. So that's the problem in that area. The whole area is under the water. So that leaves them the poor, more poor. Like they have to build the infrastructure, they have to maintain the toilet, and they have to build new ones. So the poverty level is increased due to the climate uncertainties. And municipal sanitation service, as I say, only 8% use it. They need to use it more, and municipality needs to encourage them, because for economically for the pit, the municipal charge is high, and they have a lot of procedure which the uneducated community doesn't want to fulfill. So the municipality has to cover more area. And low visualization of health risks, water contamination. Savitri Madam will come to it again, so I'm not elaborating it. And the minimal enabling environment, the budget, priorities, policies, and funds. They are very scared now also for the sanitation, fecal sludge management sector. With flooding and with disaster, it's very minimal. So that's another area that is more aggregated. And the involvement of marginalized groups in sanitation, marginality, disaster decision making nexus, like Shilpi says, they are not seen. Many people who have the bond, but they are not there. Next slide, please. Okay, so what I came out of that is for equitable distribution and resilient accessibility, we need 4 or 5 things. Like incentivizing needy households and service providers for year-round accessibility and services. In flooding, the truck cannot go to the treatment plant, so it's around 8 months a year that they have good services. And focus on health dignity of sanitation workers, particularly informal workers. They don't have, and they don't want to wear the PPE. They are not very conscious on the health impact. They don't have insurance. So their health and their rights are always compromised. So we need to put more focus on that. Peer learning among groups. Like I said previously, thorough acceptance and management of fecal sludge is very good. And they use very biogas plants, and so they can be the champions, and peer learning can occur in other community, other castes too. And build awareness. So for community to have more knowledge and have more awareness to change their behaviors, because they are not accepting that the water contamination is happening. So during the flood, we need also safe and healthy living shelters. The circular economy that we said, the fecal sludge should be collected and should be used as circular economy, and for that we did a co-composting, and then policies should be reformed. So we don't have budget and priority now for sanitation only, and more so on sanitation and extreme climate disaster events. So it should be a package thing at all the level, local, provincial, and national level, as our country is in federal system. So the municipal budget allocation should be for drainage system, because during flooding, it's all water and all the silt. So for the drainage system, inclusive and resilient sanitation, it's not economically viable, but it should be taken as a public service, and more resources and more prioritization should be in there. Thank you. Next slide. I think that's end. Yeah, this is our mud house. Thank you.
Thank you. I am just trying to. Yeah, okay. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Prabha. Thanks so much, highlighting some of the procedural and distributive inconsistencies that are occurring in Nepal. Also, the issues around flood and the pervasive issues around heat, which has not got significant attention as yet, but needs to get more and more attention, not just in terms of how workers are operating, but how heat is creating barrier across diverse social groups. We'll now move on to Sabitri, who would be presenting about contamination pathways in the face of changing climate in Nepal. Over to you, Sabitri.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, hello, I'm Sabitri Tripathi, and my presentation is on assessment of drinking water contamination pathways and sanitation practices in Gularia, Nepal. Priorities under a changing climate. This is actually group work. I have mentioned the team members here. Please, next slide. Yeah, as Prabha Madam has told that we have the research site in Gularia, which is southwestern part of Nepal, and it is Tarai, that is plain area, 145 meters from sea level. And the population of this municipality is nearly 71,991, with 13,000 plus households, and more than 30% urban population in this community. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. Our
methodology, right?
Our research, it's all right. Our research methodology is seed flow diagram generation, water quality analysis, that is chemical, biological, and some physical parameters, and household questionnaires, as well as secondary data and field observation. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the seed flow diagram we have generated, and it shows that 8% population only is doing safely managed fecal sludge treatment processes, and it means 92% population, they have unsafe practice of fecal sludge. Next slide, please. Yeah, we have water quality analysis. We did this water quality analysis with our team members, including UK team members. And we did this analysis for 2 seasons, that is dry and wet season. Dry is in June and wet, it was in September 22. And we surveyed 33 households, which covers 9 wards out of 12 wards in Gularia municipality. And during our survey, we have included the public hand pumps, as well as private hand pumps, municipal water, stored water, treated water, and altogether we had 83 samples collected. And we did pH, dissolved oxygen conductivity, turbidity, TDS, salinity, temperature, and E. coli and nitrates for the water quality analysis. We did both on-site analysis, as well as we brought the samples into Kathmandu laboratory for the analysis. So altogether, we have 87.88% private water sources analysis and 12.12% public hand pump and water sources for our analysis. Next slide, please. So key findings with respect to WAS is that throughout this research, most household toilets discharge into underground on-site tanks. That tanks is actually not a standard one. It is not contained type, that is bottom is leaking. And despite household referring to these as septic tank, they are not considered as such. Consequently, they do not effectively protect groundwater. It means 84% they are unsealed. And 93.3% household drink directly from the source without any form of treatment. And 66.7% reported waterborne diseases in the last 12 months. And majority households have a member who is responsible for emptying the septic tank. And 33% septic tanks overflow during rainy season. And 42.3% tanks not emptied at all. It means septic tanks are emptying of septic tank is unregulated, unmonitored. And 42.9% don't know about the fecal sludge treatment plant, which was constructed in the municipality premises in 2019. And 48% don't know the hazard effect related to fecal sludge. And 63% population don't use the container without handle. That is, they uses by touching their fingers into the collected water. 62% storage vessels were accessible to animals. So, and 78.3% households regularly wash their hand with soap. This is our key findings. Next slide, please. Next slide, yeah. Key findings regarding the water quality, that is stored water as well as tap water or filtered water. We have analyzed both in dry season as well as wet season. During June, we found that 44% drinking water, they are unsafe. That is, they are heavily contaminated with E. coli. And 91% drinking water during September, that is monsoon season, they are contaminated with E. coli. So this is our findings according to the different seasons. So these are very unsafe water as per WHO standards. Next slide, please. And while we asked with questionnaires with the households, they self-reported that they have different type of water-related diseases like diarrhea. Please click to show the diseases. Yeah. Diarrhea, cholera, typhoid, and these different types of waterborne, water-related diseases. They claim that 67% population for last 12 months they had waterborne diseases, and for last 5 years, 71% claim that they have water-related diseases. Next slide, please. So this is the impact of climate extremes on WAS. It shows that Gloria is very flood-prone area, which is surrounded by the river and lowland area. Next slide, please. Flooding, please click the video to show just for 1 minute.
I don't know if they can hear it.
Okay, yeah. This is the flooding during 2022 in Gloria. Gloria is surrounded by rivers, and it has alluvial type of soil, low land, 145 meter from sea level, and the water table is very shallow. Flooding in Gloria. The changes in the timing, duration, frequency, and intensity of precipitation, it is observed. It is globally observed, and in our country also we are observing this type of climate changes. Because of this, increased overland runoff, remobilization of biosolids from septic tank contents which are applied to agricultural land. Similarly, increased connectivity between septic tanks and groundwater sources. It means aquifer is contaminated, cross-contamination between protected and unprotected water sources, and reliance on alternative water sources due to flooding. These are the challenges due to flooding in Gloria. The house is full of flood, and here is the toilet. This is the toilet, and we can easily imagine how it can be over flooded, because the toilets are very temporary type, and they are using ring. Most of them, they are using ring toilets. So, and that is unsealed. So this is due to this flood. There is high risk of contamination of groundwater as well as surface water, and sanitation wise, the people are very unsafe during the flooding. Next slide, please. Yes, water temperature. Yeah, important determinant of water quality, which is important determinant of water quality since it influences physical, chemical, and biological processes. During our during our survey, field survey, we observed that the temperature varies from 26.5 degrees centigrade to 36.6 degrees centigrade during dry and wet season. And most of the samples, they have 33.1 degrees centigrade temperature. So this high temperature were found in stored water, as well, including the point of use filtration devices. This temperature extends impact on the drinking water accessibility, which affects the taste, odor, and color. This can increase the reliance on the less safe sources. And similarly, this elevated temperature is favorable for microbial growth and opportunistic pathogens and other microbes, so aesthetic, especially in water-rich nutrients. So this causes more chances for the risk of E. coli and other harmful bacteria. Next slide, please. Stored water. Please click. Stored water, these are the pictures of stored water which are practiced in Gullaria, and it shows that this is stored water as unsafe. 68% stored water, treated and untreated, was characterized as unsafe according to WHO parameters of E. coli, such as inadequate source of water or in-house treatment or poor peri-household hygiene or lack of maintenance of household filters. Next one, please. Yeah. So due to high temperature and due to their sanitation practices, the water are very unsafe, and due to the high temperature, people are referred to drink directly the groundwater from the source because they don't like to drink hot water during, because the area is it is warm climate area, so they revert to drink the unsafe water from the source directly. Next one.
Sabitri, sorry to interrupt. Would you be able to wrap up in the next 3 or 4 minutes?
Okay, yeah, it's sure. Yeah, rainfall distribution. This is the rainfall distribution I have found from Nepal government's Ministry of Energy, Water Resource, and it clearly shows that during 2022 September, the precipitation was very high than normal, 160.6%, and due to this, it directly impacts the sanitation and to the public health. If global warming continues unchecked, summer monsoon rainfall in India and neighboring countries will become stronger and more. This is from the literature review. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the impact of groundwater during dry season and monsoon season, showing diagrammatically. Next slide. So priorities and recommendation, please click. Yeah, priority: address challenges of containment, regulation, and enforcement of sealed septic tank standard design. Next one, please. Improve drinking water supply with a focus on transitioning priority households relying on shallow wells to safer sources. Improve water resilience. Next one, please. Improve provision, frequency, and affordability of fecal sludge emptying, that is greater climate resilience. Next one, please. Promote household hygiene and safer storage, treatment of drinking waters, that is biosand, cleaning, and cooling options. Next one, please. Yeah. Raise awareness of fecal sludge treatment plant and drive improvements in fecal sludge reuse, co-composting, and biogas production, which can help to reduce the greenhouse emission gases. Okay, next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabitri. I'm so sorry for rushing you, but this is a fascinating presentation, and thank you so much. A lot of debate around climate change and sanitation at present is, as we said, at least in the literature review that we are doing, is around access. But your presentation clearly shows why it's really important to look at the full sanitation chain, because there are diverse ways of contamination. Thank you so much. Moving to our visual component of research, so something that I mentioned earlier, but I should have also elaborated on that. Brown Gold is an interdisciplinary project spanning across social sciences, natural sciences, and arts and humanities. And we have today Shibaji Bose, who is joining us from India and who is also visual and creative and visual research consultant on the Brown Gold project. His work draws on long-term visual ethnography and participatory action research in remote and climatically fragile zones in Asia and Africa. He is also pursuing his PhD from the National Institute of Technology, Durgapur. And Shibaji is going to talk about his photo voice experiment or photo voice methodology that he has launched and orientated the communities towards using in Alleppey and in Nepal and other sites as well, and basically lifting voices from below and what communities have to say about this intersection. Over to you, Shibaji.
Thanks, Shilpi. I have an unstable connection and I'm unable to put the video on. I hope you understand. Participating in this ECAD-led, IDEAS-led pre-COP event and then this discussion session on sanitation and climate justice is a privilege for me. With our researchers, I will hope to facilitate the voices from our communities to talk about our experience and exchange learnings on how participatory visual methods like photo voice, photo elicitation, and embedded photography can gather perceptions from different sites in South Asia. I will also discuss our experiences from our Brown Gold sites in Africa to dwell in this cross-continent solidarity for the upcoming COP. This is a stat I have from Hannah McPherson, who is also a participant in the session. Globally, 3.6 billion lack access to safe sanitation. In Nepal, for example, 93% of municipalities lack working sewerage treatment plants. Therefore, the risks to health due to increasing climate irregularities are very high. So we explore how participatory visual methods like photo voice, photo elicitation can support the development of better sanitation and awareness of sanitation by gathering the perceptions from the point of view of our communities from different sites in Africa and Asia. Our starting point for this project is that such challenges can also be an opportunity to rethink and reimagine off-grid towns as a fertile ground for people-centered, inclusive, sustainable, equitable innovations contributing to economic growth. So going on to the next slide.
Am I on the right slide, Shibaji?
Yes, thanks,
Okay.
Shilpi.
Yeah.
So this is a map and the scope of the project. The Brown Gold is embedded in northern Ghana, which is top left, where we had done the photo voice. Tigray in northern Ethiopia, top right, where we had done the embedded photography. Guleria, and which Savitri and Prabha is talking about and dwelling about, and the plains of Nepal. And in the bottom left, the Guleria picture, and now the town which already underwent the CLTS process in the bottom right-hand portion, I think, yeah. And photo elicitation in the coastal town of Alleppey, the backwaters of the southern tip of India, bottom middle, where we have just launched photo voice. So in all these sites, we asked as a part of our transdisciplinary research, how do local communities perceive, experience, and live with off-grid sanitation challenges? How can this locally appropriate resource recovery and reuse innovation be facilitated to be socio-culturally acceptable and socially inclusive for our communities? Please, if you can go on to the next slide.
Can you see it, Shubhaji?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shilpi. One of the highlights of this project was to use photo voice to center the voices of communities and sanitation workers, inviting them to share their beliefs and perceptions within their frameworks of understanding and exploring their experiences of contending with this unfolding uncertainties around climate change, sanitation, water, and health. This embracing of this, of the indigenous lens and letting go of our control, of the researchers' control, and flipping the gaze, as Shilpi sees it, through photo voice was, facilitated in this brown gold sites. The experiences perhaps will help unearth the voices and implicit narratives and their understandings of social and cultural determinants of health amidst this, climate change dialogue. So here, after the initial orientation to the use of photo voice, if you look at the pictures, the participants are learning to use a mobile camera. In some sites, women have never touched a smartphone. We had a fun experience. So because of patriarchy in most cases, fancy smartphones are generally with male members of the family. Next slide, please. So, in its simplest sense, is this is about giving people cameras so that they can take photographs and tell why they took these photos and why they think it is important to them and their communities. This method is usually embedded with people where the researchers, the NGO workers, the visual method practitioner has either worked earlier or has an interlocutor with rapport with the local community. The technique usually involves a group activity, hence the voice in photo voice is also an acronym, the voice of the individual and collective empowerment. After everyone had taken the photographs, the group sit together and discusses the photos and accompanying narratives and selects the pictures and the descriptions. The priority issues and themes are decided by the group themselves, and then they present it to the local community to validate the evidence. Here, during the photo voice group meeting, as you can see, the researcher shows the pictures downloaded into the laptop, which were taken by them, by the community to know why they took these pictures. Next slide, please. So, going into the process, if you see the mock session on presenting it to the local policymakers is going on, because it's women and we had to give them some kind of support. Other pictures are from a policy event in Guleria, Nepal, as Sabitri and Pava was talking about, where the community representatives present the photo evidence and the narratives of the municipality. So interviews with the women later reveal that the women think that the photo voice has enabled them to take a man's place and do a man's job, and they feel proud that too they too can be the voice of the community. The sense and the awareness of the change within them is one of the critical aspects of the photo voice, where evidence-based storytelling with pictures and narratives helps to communicate the indigenous implicit knowledge of the marginalized living in this remote off-grid areas. Next slide, please. So, as Shilpi was, telling in the beginning that this project interdisciplinary and the transdisciplinary team including Savitri Prabha and, James, Hannah, um, bring together, and also Diego, bring together social science, engineering, microbiology, and creative arts experience in order to facilitate this bottom-up processes to the use of the photo elicitation technique. So the photos taken by natural science researchers, if you look at the top one of the pictures, the photos taken by the natural science researchers were able to draw out reflections from the community around themes that were not easily articulated verbally. Understanding these experiences of the sanitation change through photo elicitation, that's one of the big uh, elicitations from this brown gold project. This brown gold's visuals method study in Nepal has used photo elicitation interviews to investigate sanitation experiences and community perceptions of the sanitation change. The method revealed insights that might have remained hidden in more conventional qualitative and quantitative analyses. For example, we discuss with participants diseases manifesting from unsafe disposal of fecal matter and toilets getting waterlogged during the rainy season. A clear reminder of the weather variability. This led to discussions on health, access, financing, and expenses from going to state and private hospital for treatment. In fact, through iterations with the community, the narratives and reflections revealed, and it was received from the community, informed a change in the photo elicitation chart. If we look at below, it now has pictures of good and bad practices along the sanitation change. Next slide, please. The photo voice in ongoing sites in the brown gold project, there are some initial evidence that is coming, and just want to highlight in terms of what in terms of climate change and increasing weather variability and where the justice lay. If you see the in the left is the drainage systems in Nepal, and on the right is water scarcity in Ghana. In this case, the participants talked about the direct relation to health, especially of the children, the rise in incidences of health emergencies in the erratic monsoons, like exponential rise in diarrheal cases, number of deworming episodes that children have to go through, lack of quality control in the water supply, access to drinking water in the summer months, uh, a young mother in Ghana, and this is a solidarity of experiences from South Asia and Africa. She said it's a trauma for the mothers of small children every monsoon. Next slide, please. Thanks, Shilpi. So here it's a predicament of the migrants who travel to towns to earn their living. These are visuals which are coming from Nanded in India. Um, uh, we thought it to be an effort to share the challenges presented by using these methods to capture the experiences of a vulnerable migrant population around wash and climate change, which have been exacerbated by erratic weather systems. Pictures on depicted here are on access to clean water, availability of proper toilet facilities, and adopting personal hygiene practices by the migrant population to cope with the sanitation challenges. Next slide, please. These are the pictures from the women photo voice groups from different sites. One element was common, pictures of unending stream of their daily activities, which remains unpaid and hidden. And increases because of climate change. We hear about climate justice, and we can well fathom it will absolutely get exacerbated. This became great entry points also to start kind of conversation and evoke a range of responses. Embracing of these co-produced visual methods by the community provided the researcher with an intimate understanding of how these women contend and engage with different aspects of sanitation. Next slide, please. So this is, as we were talking about justice, and this have become really huge. Uh, uh, this erratic rainfall, sometimes heavy rainfall within a span of 3-4 days, leading to flash floods, long summers resulting in drought-like situations. One of the recurring themes, what we found was from the sites, is the variability in weather, its growing unpredictability and difficulty to anticipate, and it is leading to uncertainty in cropping, sowing, uncertain yields, and resulting in food insecurity of the family, increasing intensity of heat spells. So the priority, as we talk about the WASH, is on a downward trend. Already the key opinion leaders in the village, if you see they're saying this change in weather and climate is worrying. They may be alluding to climate change effects probably being felt by the agrarian populations across Asia and Africa. And they say the worst is yet to come. Next slide, please. Yeah, amidst this changing climate uh, events and the changing climate, access to health, the health of women and children in terms of climate crisis. If you see on the top, the pictures are from Guleria Hospital showing the OPD timings and rates. People walking to a spot where the mobile health clinic boat will anchor. This from LFP, and the bottom is auxiliary nursemaid making their field visits in a boat and a mobile health clinic. This shows how visual methods and techniques can record, reflect, and advocate community health issues relating to WASH and what they consider essential amidst this changing weather patterns. So one of I'll just quote, it saves us a lot of time and money in out-of-pocket expenses. There is a strong community level healthcare supply network. As most of us are daily laborers, traveling long distances to a medical facility means losing a day's wage. A photovoice participant from LFP. Similar words were echoed by their counterparts in Nepal. So I come to the end, and if you come, yeah. So this is, I am mainly facilitating, and if you see that this are the photo credits and web links for more such resources. We aim to bring the communities to the COP conference to ask for climate justice and facilitate the lived experience of WASH with the COP community. We see ECAD as an essential platform to open solidarity dialogues to complement the dominant policy narrative of the modelers, the planners, and the policymakers. This will be a journey towards plural knowledge themes. Thanks, Shilpi. Thanks to all.
Great. Thank you, Shibaji. Thank you so much for that evocative presentation and also showing us how PhotoVoice, for instance, can actually help bridge some of the procedural dimensions of injustice, especially in Guleria, for instance. We know that communities who were participants in PhotoVoice were actually able to share the platform with policymakers and discuss their concerns. So that is also an aspect of how methodologies that we actually use in the field have a direct bearing on issues of ethics as well as participatory as well as participation and issues of procedural justice and injustice. I will now, so thank you all the speakers for the great presentations. I want to move on to my colleague, Professor James Ebden, and I think I saw Ruhil also, yes, and my colleague at IDS, Ruhil Iyer, who would give a short reflection on what they've heard and seen so far before I open the floor for Q&A. Just to briefly introduce James and Ruhil. James Ebden is a professor of microbiology at the University of Brighton, UK. He's an environmental microbiologist interested in the role of water in the spread and control of water-related diseases. Ruhil Iyer is a research officer at the Sanitation Learning Hub at IDS. She works on participatory research and action learning in the water, sanitation, and hygiene sector. So over to you, James, and then Ruhil, please. The floor is yours.
Pete, and thanks to all our speakers as well. It's been fascinating hearing more about the sites, many of which I've been to as well. But this project has been really interesting in that it's pushed us outside our comfort zones. It is genuinely interdisciplinary in that it does force us to work at those margins that we tend to shy away from. And it has helped me to personally to visualize some of these more unseen issues that exist within sanitation and which have parallels to climate as well. So I know Shibaji was showing the sanitation service chain, and so from the sort of containment of human waste to how it's emptied and transported, treated, and hopefully reused or disposed of, and to visualize that climate is going to impact on multiple kind of stages of that sanitation service chain at multiple points, and being able to visualize whether that's the flow of invisible pathogens through water due to increased connectivity between floodwaters and groundwater sources, whether that is to do with the flooding of treatment infrastructure, which we saw certainly happening at Gullaria, the municipal fecal sludge treatment plant there, where there was actual physical inundation of the site that prevented the site from working for a considerable length of time afterwards. But also the way that climate is driving how we reuse fecal sludge and fecal waste, the unpredictable nature of changing climates in terms of monsoons becoming stronger and more erratic, and how we prevent people coming into contact with pathogens. And so we've worked a lot on this project, and perhaps it hasn't been emphasized enough, is that we've worked with marginalized communities. And these are communities who've been physically marginalized, pushed out to the very limits certainly in Gullaria, to the limits of the town, to areas which are highly susceptible to flooding. So these people are dealing with the joint burdens of sort of unsafe sanitation, but also of climate change as well. So I think those elements have jumped out at me, and a sort of a question, I suppose, to everyone here would be maybe how do we standardize climate resilience when we're thinking about sanitary technologies, sanitary solutions? Because it's something that we're going to need to do, is to be able to deal with this in a more standardized way than has currently happened as well. And certainly some of the methods that the NC discussed in terms of working with summer schools, working with the communities. I think, sorry, I'm jumping around slightly, but in terms of we heard about the problems of people drinking water that is extremely warm, that makes them not want to use those sources. So it's an issue of accessibility. But another problem there is to do with biosand filters. If you've got very warm water, you end up with biofilms, you end up with potential growth and regrowth of microorganisms in those systems. Can we use summer schools, training events to help improve maintenance of these? They can be treated and backwashed and actually looked after in a way that will make them more robust to those sort of climate shocks. So I guess it's sort of, learning from each other and from the work that's going on at the different sites, and how we can really sort of lever those advances to the best way forward in terms of being ready for these kind of climate shocks, which are already upon us. And at the very beginning, we heard from Roshni about the invisibility of heat when it comes to climate. Flooding is very obvious, droughts are very obvious. Problems with heat, particularly when we look at people's drinking water sources and things that push people to more dangerous practices. It's really important to try and have tools that allow us to communicate those elements which are perhaps harder and less visually sort of stimulating. And so I see parallels in the way that we look at microorganisms and their transfer through the environment from the human gut back, hopefully not back into humans, and how we actually kind of, look at and communicate some of these climate issues. So I think they're the sort of issues that were jumping out from this afternoon's presentations for me. I suppose I was also shocked by the sort of somewhat lack of systematic management and the fragmented responsibilities that existed in terms of how municipal services were provided or not. But yeah, they're the sort of points that I'd probably like to raise from that. But that one question about how do we standardize climate resilience when we come to think about future sort of sanitation, on-site sanitation technologies would be something I'd be interested to look at. You're muted.
Thanks, James. And that question is relayed to all panelists. We'll come back to it in the Q&A. I want to quickly move to Ruhil for her quick provocations or reflections.
Thank you, Shilpi. And yes, I'll be quick so we have time for questions. We've been doing some work on climate and sanitation at the Sanitation Learning Hub, along with lots of partners in different countries. And what I'm going to speak to you today is on links between rural sanitation and climate change. And what I would like for you to take away from it is that a lot of these problems overlap. Urban and rural are not binaries, and we need to be looking at things more holistically across the sanitation sector more broadly. So a lot of people have already said, so climate events and climate hazards impact sanitation and hygiene services in numerous interlinking pathways. So we know all of these direct impacts that Prabha and also NC have already outlined across the sanitation service chain and across service levels in terms of physical access, muddy pathways, particularly in rural contexts, or pits collapsing, infrastructure notwithstanding a lot of these extreme impacts, and the repeated need to build and maintain and rebuild your facility over and over again when you're also facing a sort of more broad household crisis where your livelihoods have been damaged because your cattle has died or your crops have failed because of these withstanding and long-standing climate impacts. So direct pathways, like I mentioned, and then also indirect pathways because you've lost your livelihood. All of this then make it harder for people to continue to prioritize and continue to invest in their sanitation and hygiene services to practice safe behavior. But a lot of this is also guided by social context and your local activities. So your vulnerability to how you're impacted by climate and how your sanitation behavior is impacted is largely also drawn with how these hazards interact with your context and the activities that you engage in. It affects your access to local resources and markets. It affects your livelihood and then the consequent funds you need for safe sanitation. And then the burden of responding to these impacts are also felt very differently across different households and different social groups. And this has been said over and over again, negative impacts are most disproportionately felt by people who are already vulnerable because of various reasons, and then it just serves to exacerbate existing inequities and vulnerabilities. Roshni already mentioned this, so we have lots more evidence and literature on extreme events, so floods, cyclones, storm surges, and we are already seeing it challenge existing service levels, and we're already seeing it either hinder coverage, and then also in sometimes coverage slips, and progress is now even reversing. And when I mean service levels, I mean access and use of sanitation services across the value chain. And then at a more local level, however, there are still some gaps that remain with slower onset and less dynamically changing and less visible climate-induced changes, such as prolonged droughts. We've already discussed heat, but then also desertification. There's also some small niche challenges that some areas will face, for instance, salination and increasing salination. Some of my work, for instance, in Bangladesh indicated increasing salinity because we were working in the mangrove region in the southern bit of Bangladesh. And a lot of problems were reported with increased saline water, not just to mention reduced drinking water, but then also increased saline water was caused multiple repercussions, with I think is still confusing people how to deal with it. On the one hand, it was very positive because people were able to expand their livelihoods into shrimp farming, which is suitable when you have more saline water. But on the other hand, women who were primarily engaging in this kind of shrimp farming had to stand hip deep in water for 9 to 10 hours a day, which caused multiple menstrual hygiene and health-related problems with urinary tract infections, rashes, ulcers, blisters, and things like that. And it severely challenged a lot of their menstrual hygiene access and management because they were thinking about using, and they were frequently using cloth that was washed in saline water. So how do we think about these more regionally specific climate impacts in a holistic way that benefits multiple aspects of people's lives as opposed to just their livelihoods or just their sanitation? How do we enable and support adaptive capacity in a manner that provides dignity as well as equitable service levels across everybody within households and within villages more broadly? Globally, there's also an unclear and potentially overlapping terminology-related issues that we need to be addressing in the sanitation sector. So the JMP, the Joint Monitoring Programme, has set the goalpost at safely managed sanitation for everybody by 2030. But what does that mean for increasing climate realities? What do we mean by climate resilient sanitation? How does that relate to safely managed sanitation? Because they're not the same thing. But we are setting two linked but different targets now when we're increasingly speaking about climate resilient sanitation. How do we think of climate resilient sanitation that moves beyond durable infrastructure, that moves beyond technology and durable solutions in a way that creates a consistent behavioral and consistent financial implications and adjustments in the way that people think about their service levels and access? How do we bring in ideas and address all of these underlying issues about vulnerabilities around poverty, marginalization, and gender to enable more robust and resilient people and robust and resilient livelihoods? Because these are the underlying issues that the sector continues to grapple with. So we will continue to have climate-related challenges, and we will continue to have sanitation-related challenges that will both help and hinder each other. But then unless we also address existing underlying issues of poverty and vulnerability, we're going to continue to see these cyclical impacts. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ruel. Sorry, I hope I didn't make you stop there. I was just very mindful that we are, great points, and thank you for those provocations as well. And I think unending debates in a way, because they are not recent debates. These are wider issues, not just with climate change sector, but widely with within the wash sector, water sector, sanitation sector, and within climate change. The climate change arena is cropping up with new buzzwords each time. So climate resilient development pathways is the new buzzword given to us by IPCC Working Group 2. So these are some of the challenges I think that we need to contend with. Before I go to the questions that have been posted in the chat, as well as questions that have been raised by two of you, I know there are just 6 minutes left and I need to get back to the panelists, but I really want to invite the audience here if they have any further questions, clarifications, reflections that you would like to share with us. The floor is open. I think you can unmute yourself. If not, then please do type your questions. Okay. Maybe I will go back to Hannah's question. And in the meantime, if there are any questions, please feel free to type. So Hannah has asked specific questions to each of the speakers. And I wonder if, so I can go around the panel and each of you have about 2 minutes to address the questions that James, Ruhil, and Hannah have raised, whichever part you want to address. And I will start in the same order. So Roshni and then NC. Whatever you would, and you can also share your broader reflections, please. Roshni? Your question is, what will be your next steps in the review? So, and do you have a sense of the key gaps in the literature?
Hi, so this is an ongoing review, as we already mentioned. So we want to test the hypothesis even further. So we continue with it on one hand side, also to fine tune the research with particularly the slower onset of events. And once we have also made a list of stakeholders that we should speak to have triangulated it and also like conclude with the gaps. And with regard to the hypothesis that's mentioned with regard to the possible reasons for them, I think we're still in the process of including and summarizing some of the possible reasons. One of it, as already reinstated during this discussion, is that the major climate hazards that are studied are because of the immediate and the visible and the pronounced impact of it on sanitation. And the other aspects and the emerging themes such as circular economic aspects, etc., are some things which we have shortlisted as one of the gap and want to fine tune it and want to do deeper research to answer your question.
I think just to add to that, Hannah, the emphasis of the project is on circular economy practices, and we are actually the attempt will be to develop a framework using these multiple lenses that we are coming up with. So there is already an established framework within climate justice, so how to reconceptualize some of these aspects. And then, and the findings are already emerging from our sides, and then dig a bit deeper. So we're just at the first few phases right now. Thank you. NC.
Yeah, thanks, Shilpi. I don't see a specific question addressed to me. So basically, what I learned from this session is the climate thrust, which we have not much kind of discussed explicitly. We were into sanitation. So I think this can be a very interesting take, which we can discuss in November, when we meet. Circularity versus circular economy can be a very interesting another thread that we can. And then the transdisciplinarity, co-production of knowledge, both were kind of our great strengths of the project, which we can actually see how we can actually take it forward. And then, of course, interdisciplinarity with scientists and social scientists coming together. And I'm working on the policy process aspect of it. So I will add climate also. That's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, NC. And would you like to respond to James's question on standardization at all?
I think, the contextual learnings we can actually compile and see whether, how can standardization can happen. I'm sure that in South Asia, across South Asia, it's much more possible than, kind of increasing the regional things. So, James, of course, I think we can think about, standardizing across South Asia. There's a
Great.
very shared kind of a cultural, social, political reality that we have. Thank you.
Thanks, NC. A minute each to Prabha and Sabitri.
Okay. Thank you, Hannah, for raising the question. And when we started researching in Guleria, we found there were 5 quite prominent group of caste and ethnicity. So that were Tharu, Muslims, Madishe, Brahman, Kshatri, and Dalits. But all of them were more than 10% of the population of Guleria. We tried to find try to ask the same question around each of the group. We have some group specific FGDs, and what we found was from each group after validation, the Tharu are the champions, and they traditionally don't shy away from using the fecal sludge as fertilizer. They also are the most good farmers there. But others are also farmers, but they use it. So they do the biogas. They also accept the biogas. They are the one among the 60% of the people that clean their pits themselves, and they don't hire people. They and the list, they don't hire people because they say it's our, so why should we give to others? And once the treatment plant also sold the end product, and they were taken to the banana plantation, which gave very good results. So that's why, but the Brahman, Kshatri, the Muslims, and the Madishe group, they don't accept the fecal sludge as fertilizer or a good thing to use. So that's why I was telling we can do a peer learning or peer sharing session, so that they also can use the fecal sludge, which will make the environment circularity and more resilient. That's what I was telling.
Thanks, Prabha. Sabitri.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. From the research outcome of Guleria, as James has told just now, the main discourse, I think, is what is the future step for the standardization of septic tank for the climate resilient purposes. Yeah, because technological intervention is very important there, because our research findings said that the biosand filter which people are using, they are actually not using. They have the biosand filter, but they are not using because they don't know about the operation of the biosand filter, how it is clean. Yeah, and the water from the biosand filter is warm, so people are not interested to drink that warm water. So how we can introduce them to make the water cool? One thing is, and second one is how to make the septic tank standard. Though in Nepal there are a lot of discourses going on to make the septic tank standardized, and there is just finished the joint sectoral review on sanitation. So I think this should be properly implemented throughout the country. It is not the Guleria problem, but throughout Nepal's problem about the leakage of the septic tank. These two things are very important. And Hannah has raised that, she asked about the what population we have sampled. So actually our research is focused to mainly to the marginal communities, and we covered that one. And we covered public hand pump also, so that it covers more population. It's more than, I think, 1,200 people were covered during our research survey. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabitri. And there's a question for Shibaji, which I believe he's partly answered in the comment. But Shibaji, would you like to add something more? And there's also a question from Bahadur Ali Abbasi from Pakistan, I believe. So we'll get to that. Shibaji, do you have any further additions to make? Is Shibaji there? I think he's dropped off, probably. Okay. There's a question from Bahadur Ali Abbasi, who's asking us about how to cope with climate change, especially in Pakistan, any practical policy or findings. So in this session, particularly because it was drawing on our brown gold project, which has India, Nepal as their sites in Asia. So we have really looked at some of these sites, but as I said before, when we started, the session that these have resonance with issues in Pakistan, and also, as we've spoken about, also in our sites in Africa. I know that Ruhil is involved in some work in Pakistan. Also, the PI of this project, Professor Laila Mehta, has a project on GastroPak, which focuses on Pakistan, and this is also looking at issues around resource recovery. So some of the debates that we've touched upon are quite prominent also in Pakistan. And as NC was also saying, that there are these cultural, social, and political contiguities across these regions. So some of the lessons that we've heard today in terms of methodology, in terms of bridging, might be relevant for Pakistan as well, because from what I know, from experience and also the work that we've been doing on other projects, issues of heat, flood, all the climate shocks and hazards are very, very prevalent in Pakistan. So I think that is what I would add, but maybe we can also check with Ruhil for a second. Ruhil, do you have anything else to add to that question? Because you're directly working there, I think.
Not directly that I can say this is my recommendation.
Yeah.
But what I can say, no, that we cannot. What I can say is I think Pakistan at the moment is facing quite an stark humanitarian crisis with floods from last year, as well as then that's moving into now more development context with people having to be rehabilitated and moved. So I think what we can learn from this context is that this is not isolated to Pakistan, and it's quite plausible for it to happen across South Asia. And these extreme events are happening at a scale that is unprecedented, and that we are actively facing. So I don't necessarily have a policy recommendation or finding that is useful to say for Pakistan, but what I can say is it's a really useful case for us to all learn from and then extend and extrapolate towards our broader case studies in South Asia at the moment.
Thanks, Ruhil. And just to add to that, I think all the presentations have highlighted this, and this is something that I started with, that climate change will be a stress multiplier. So system is already stressed in different ways. And even if we minus climate change from the context, there are structural injustices in place. And what climate change is doing, it's not creating those injustices, it's multiplying and magnifying those injustices. So as climate justice scholars and activists have argued, if you really want to address climate injustice and issues of climate change, it is really about targeting those root causes of inequality. And it holds even for the challenges that we've talked about within today in terms of climate change and sanitation. So I think any policies around social protection, human development, capability enhancement are key to addressing some of the issues that we've raised today across the sites and across the panel. I think I would end there unless somebody else wants to come up and share their reflections. Anybody from the audience or the panelists? Any further questions? I know it's getting late in South Asia. So, okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining this session. A big thank you to the speakers, the panelists, and the discussants, of course, for taking time out and for preparing the presentation and walking us through the fascinating and interesting findings. But of course, more importantly, the challenges that we have faced and we will continue to face as we move into the future. There was a suggestion from Shibaji about bridging, how do we take these messages to COP? So in that light, I think ICAD has been a prominent advocate of the South Asian voices, and the whole idea behind these pre-COP series is actually to post those key takeaway messages and take them to COP, where the South Asia Resilience Hub is organized during the COP session. So we hope that would be taken forward. I think the recording will be shared. If I'm not wrong, Bahadur, it would be posted on the ICAD webpage, but we will also share the links through our social media platforms. So thanks everybody for joining. I hope you enjoyed the session, and we look forward to being in touch through different ways. Have a nice evening or a productive day ahead. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Shilpi.
Thank you, Shilpi, for moderating.
Roshni, can you stay on for a second? Because we need to speak to ICAD, I think.